Have you thought this through?
No way will that work.
Are you sure? Is there any money in that?
You'll never make any money doing that. How are you going to pay the mortgage? Just get a job.
You're going to try to sell that? Why can't you be normal like anybody else?
Oh, boy.
Were your parents morons too?
The savvy entrepreneur to the rescue.
Congratulations. That really turned out well.
Really good job.
I'm going to admit it. I'm surprised.
You know, I wish I thought of that.
I never thought anyone would do. How did you do that?
I'm so glad you're pursuing your dream.
I wish I had the courage to follow my dreams.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Savvy Entrepreneur. We are broadcasting live on WLCB 101.5 FM from the greater Chicago, Milwaukee area. I am your host, Doris Nagel. And why am I here? Because I'm a crazy entrepreneur myself, and I love helping other entrepreneurs. I've counseled many startups and small businesses as part of my law and consulting practice, and I've also started or helped start at least 9 different startups. Candidly, with varying degrees of success, I have made, quite candidly, a lot of mistakes along the way, and my passion is to share what I've learned and find other experts and entrepreneurs to share their advice and their insights. So the goals of the show are to inform, but also to inspire. As always, I welcome your comments, your questions, and suggestions. If there's a topic you'd like to hear about, you have an issue or a challenge, you want to be a guest, or just want to share a great resource, email me at dnagel, Nagel, at lakesradio.org. I promise you the show will be better for your input. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest for today. Joining me by phone all the way from England is Fred Copestake. Fred is the founder and principal consultant at a company he calls Brindis. He's an experienced sales, leadership, and performance trainer and consultant and has had his own business doing that for 20 years. So he knows something about how to make that work. He has degrees in commerce and Spanish. He lived for a year in Spain and is fluent in Spanish. He's also a big sports fan and in particular loves his rugby. He has a wonderful sense of humor, and I think it will come through in our discussion, and a unique ability to convey complex concepts through presentations and through interactive training and exercises to really help his clients truly understand and apply what they're learning through working with Fred. So with that, Fred, welcome to the Savvy Entrepreneur. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
No, Doris, thank you for inviting me. I wondered who you were introducing then at one stage, to be fair, but I'll absolutely take that. It's really nice of you.
And so you should. So, Fred, I think the natural place to start is to tell the listeners a little bit about your business. What exactly does Brindis do, and how do you do it there?
Okay, so as you've said, it's a sales performance consultancy. It's all about helping our clients get the results that they want. We deliver this in sort of 3 ways, which do end up getting overlapped. We talk about training, coaching, and consultancy. They're all slightly different, but they all can contribute to that end result. How do we go about it? I mean, really, it's by understanding. Essentially, it's by understanding what the client wants, what are they trying to achieve, and then putting together the stuff that's going to make that happen for them. As I say, a mixture of those elements.
So why did you decide to create this business? I mean, there are lots of consulting firms, bigger consulting firms, big training firms. Why did you start your own firm?
Essentially, it was through a really brilliant opportunity that I had. I was working full-time for a training company, and we had a client called Eurocermex. They were the European or the EMEA subsidiary of Grupo Modelo, the Mexican brewer.
Right.
And we'd done a couple of pieces of work for them. We started off with a conference. We ended up doing some work in Germany, Italy, back here in the UK, and we proposed that they should run a sales academy. They looked at the idea. They thought it was great. and they realised that they wouldn't be able to do it through the training company that I was working for. They turned around to me and said,
so why not though?
They were looking at cost. We were coming in at sort of full rate consultancy fees, and the amount of work that they would need to do, because really it was about running a number of courses and a number of interactions to get the hearts and minds of their distributors. They just looked at it and said, we've not budgeted for that. But they said, maybe there's a clever way of doing this. Would you like to come and work for us to do that? It's put me in an interesting position. I spoke immediately to the MD of the company I was with. He said, look, I'm glad you came to me. It was the right thing to do. He said, if there's any other client, we'd say no. He said, but with these guys, you're probably the only one that really gets them anyway. They spend a lot of their time speaking Spanish. They do things in odd ways. You don't get flustered by it. What would you like to do? And I said, well, I'd love the chance to go and do that. It sounds really interesting. Sounds a lot of fun.
It does, yeah.
And it was in the end. But the way that we ended up setting up was that it was actually better for me to work for them as a consultant rather than be a full-time employee, to do with the fact that their headquarters were Belgium. I was living in the UK. And so that's where I set up my own company. And yeah, it's kind of luck, I guess. And it was fantastic because they didn't actually take all of my time. And so I ended up carrying on working for the company that I'd essentially left. So I was absolutely having your cake and eating it. It was brilliant fun.
Well, I think you're a good example of how I think many consultants and trainers, coaches start out with a significant anchor client, which is exactly what you had. In fact, you had 2 anchor clients to start out with, which is, you're right. That's a once in a lifetime opportunity to be able to launch your own business, right?
Absolutely. I mean, carpe diem. I really did that, and I'm really thankful for the guys there, but both at Eurocermex and the guys at Structured Training for letting me do what really was the right thing at the time. So
So I have to ask, how did you come up with the name Brindis?
Well, first thing, I wanted to have a company name. I didn't want to just be Fred Copestake Associates or something like that. A name is far more scalable, and that had always been even then would have been the ambition, or was the ambition. Brindis is the Spanish for toast, not the toast that you put, not butter and jam, but toast as in chin chin, raising glasses, and because of the sort of connections with the drinks industry and everything, it just kind of made sense. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
So it's kind of like cheers. Basically.
It's cheers, absolutely. It's cheers. Brindis is a toast, so it's chinking glasses and saying cheers.
Well, it has a nice kind of happy, upbeat kind of sound to it too, which is great because when you have a trainer come in, we've all been through training courses that are just deathly dreary, and so I think it's a nice way of conveying your sense of humor and sense of fun that you bring. So fair disclosure to our listeners, I've known Fred for quite a while and know him fairly well, so I can say that about him, which I wouldn't be able to do about a lot of my guests that come on the show.
That's very kind of you, Doris. Thank you again.
So what's a typical project for you look like today?
So when I'm looking at projects, I sort of think in a couple of dimensions, and a project will tend to, in my mind, be either tactical or strategic. A tactical project is where somebody comes along and says, can you do me something on, I don't know, negotiation, say? And we end up talking, and we make sure it is negotiation that they actually require. That's a good one where actually we sometimes find it's selling they need before to get to negotiation. But it's something that ends up in a couple of days training. And that's great. It's going to be better than nothing. A more strategic project, it involves more to get to the results that people require. It's a more robust, solid approach. And so it'll mix up those consultancy and coaching elements as well as the training. The footprint, if you like, of the perfect project for me is one that would involve an element of research. So it's understanding what the guys are doing, what they want to be doing, what does good look like, where do they actually want to be. It would then involve an element of the design of putting the right elements into the interventions before having some kind of management kickoff to show that they're absolutely behind what we're trying to do. and then space out a number of classroom training sessions. Because I work so much with salespeople, they need classroom. Is kind of how they're built. In between those, then, what we would want to do would be have some coaching, so some more one-to-one elements. And the coaching would tend to be around how they're applying the learning from the last sessions. So if we can then pick a project for each of them, and so it might be a key account, it might be something that they're trying to achieve, we can apply the new stuff right into the project they're working on, so that by the time we've completed the whole of the cycle, I like to finish with a presentation where the guys talk to senior management about what they've learned. But equally, we should start to be seeing the rewards of applying the new learning into the project, and we can say, look guys, there's your return on investment. That's what the training has helped you bring. And that's only focusing on one project each. The guys should be looking at many more. That's the perfect scenario. That's the best.
It is, and I think, having been a consultant / coach myself for a number of years, I think you touched on what I think, at least, is one of the biggest challenges in the whole industry, which is you find a client and they think they need customer negotiation training, but perhaps they need something else. And what they think they need is not what you, in your years of experience, know they really need to deliver results. How do you deal with that frequent dilemma?
Partly it is relying on the experience and sort of saying, I'm not just set up overnight. I've been doing this for a long time. The stuff that you're saying, I want to challenge. I want to question more and really understand what it is that you're doing. So, I'm a sales trainer. I should practice what I preach and apply a robust sales process. So it's doing that and really helping people to understand for themselves that they might well be asking for the wrong thing. So even if I can see it straight away, I have to go through that process to help them understand. And to be fair, that's exactly what we would be training salespeople to do. Even if I don't see it, I would still go through the process to make sure that we are trying to tackle the right issues to get them to where they want to be.
Well, that I think leads into another question, which I think you kind of alluded to, which is what your ideal client looks like. What makes a really good client for you?
Big training budget. No, okay. No. What's the profile? So for me, it would be a company that has got lots of salespeople, ideally international. Brindis does work all over the world. We've actually worked in 36 different countries.
Goodness.
Yeah, I got back from Azerbaijan last week, and so that made number 36.
Oh, we could probably talk an hour about your experience there. I'm sure that was really fascinating.
Easily, yeah, it was. It was very interesting. But no, if we say lots of salespeople, it's international, and where I think I get the best results, where I know we get the best results, is that when we've got people who've got a really solid, a really good offering, the stuff they're selling is excellent, but probably from more of a technical background. Because what happens is the salespeople will then tend to come from that same technical background. They'll be great at talking about that. And so what they'll tend to do is seek out people like themselves or other technical people, and they'll talk for hours on end about what that is. Missing out, and do a good job with it. And that is a part and parcel of how to sell those more complex solutions. However, there will be other people in the decision-making unit, and that's where they will tend to be more uncomfortable or just not know how to address them and to sort of deliver the things that are going to be of value and of interest to these different buyers. And that's where we can make an immense difference.
And I think that's a very common problem among startup companies in general. People they have an idea, a concept, they're quite good at the technical aspects of it. And I'm thinking in particular software startup companies, small tech companies are often full of people who really understand coding and the apps they've developed or their idea, but really lacking in sales skills. And I think that's a pretty common thing among a lot of small companies.
It is, and sometimes sales can almost be considered a bit of a dirty word.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it is that. And
You
quite
picture a used car salesperson. It's like, ew, I don't want that. They don't want me to sell them.
precisely. So quite often it's just starting off, shifting that mindset and getting people to understand it's a profession. There's process involved in it. There's things we can do time and time again to help ourselves be more successful and help your customers by doing that thing. Once people get that, it then makes the rest of the training so much easier. So I would always, in that scenario, invest time up front to help them get it. It certainly has an impact later on.
Well, I think you alluded to something else, though, in your profile of the ideal client, which is buy-in from a pretty senior person, or ideally the entire management team. I've seen a lot of initiatives fail because that just wasn't in place.
Absolutely, yeah. So very often, we will talk about decision-making units. I actually ban people from saying the word decision maker because I'll say there isn't one. It's made from a bunch of people who you have to satisfy each of their needs, each of their wants. When you've done that, that's when you get the consensus. There might be somebody who ultimately signs it off, and this is where a naive salesperson gets it wrong because they put all their effort into that person who could well be standing back and saying, well, I don't really care. As long as he's happy, she's happy, and he's happy, then I'm happy. I'll just sign the check. Don't tell me about all this stuff that you do because I'm not bothered. So it's, again, sometimes readjusting people and giving them structure in how to approach all those different influences that are going on.
Well, that's an interesting point as well. So sometimes in the sales process, I'm guessing you need to help coach your contact, or maybe even actively help them sell the project within their organization.
So in the way we actually train that, we get people to identify the different buyers, different buying motives. But we say, look, we want to find out the person who is your coach. I use that language. Some people call it a sponsor. I sometimes call it that, but it is that person who's going to help you navigate the organization, understand who's who, go into bat for you, and really help you move things forward faster. It's your guy on the inside, if you like. And it's a very deliberate, and conscious sales strategy to try to identify who that is.
Well, it must help to be a sales consultant because you know how to best help yourself sell the projects to your clients, which is for any kind of a professional service business, I think it's a real art form.
It is, and sometimes it's the principle of cobbler's shoes. So
what does that mean?
Well, if you look at a cobbler's shoes, are they as good as all of their clients? Maybe not, because they spend the time, making their customer shoes great and don't always apply the stuff at home. So, do we always do exactly as we say we do? Maybe sometimes not. And I do sometimes catch myself doing stuff or thinking stuff and saying, Fred, what would you say to one of your clients if they were doing this or not doing this, as the case may be?
Right, right.
It's sort of embarrassing, but it's only me who's being embarrassed, so it's okay.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's pretty endemic to any kind of an entrepreneurial business because you have to wear a lot of different hats. And frankly, most of us aren't good at all of those hats, or even if we're pretty good at it, there's some we're a lot better at than others. So it's often a challenge, I think, for certainly solopreneurs or very small companies. It's a challenge to manage yourself because that's really what you need to do because you're the boss. You're the boss of you.
Dead right. Yeah. And when in my case, I'm selling my own time, that time, that day away, that 2 days, 3 days training away, I've got to have my focus on the client. That's what they pay me for. That's where I'm going to get my results. So yeah, time goes very, very quickly.
And time is your most precious commodity. That's true, I think, of most business people. You've alluded to and talked about the ideal client. Are there clients you kind of steer away from? I'll just tell you from my personal experience, my own confession is one of the biggest mistakes I made was not profiling the clients that I didn't want to work with or that weren't a good fit so that I didn't waste a lot of time with them.
Yeah, there is, and it's massively ironic in that the ones that I would tend to steer clear of are SMEs. I am one myself, but I don't really want to work with SME. A couple of reasons behind this. So SME, I think you use the same language, small and medium
Yes,
enterprises. Yeah,
small and medium
um,
enterprise, right?
yeah, so same thing. Why? Okay, so it's to do with my specialization. So yeah, I'm all about B2B sales. Yes, an SME could be, but it tends to be more of the corporate sale, the bigger sale, the more complex, the more sophisticated. With those bigger sales teams and rolling stuff out sort of across countries and sort of across different regions, whatever. What I've also found is, and let's think about why we do this stuff. We do it because we like it, yes, but we want to be paid. And SMEs won't always necessarily have the budget or the ability to be able to fund the training that they might need. So it's a bit brutal, but it's realistic, and that's again the training that we give to salespeople. It's go after the type of account that are interesting to you and that are going to be interested in you, and try to get that match. If you don't, you're going to be wasting a lot of time. So
Right.
I wouldn't spend a lot of time promoting into that area.
Well, I think it's important. You don't have to justify it, obviously. It's every business has a niche and knows what they are good at. They may not be able yet to articulate it, but I think being able to sort that out and being clear about that is really important. So there's nothing wrong with it. What I would observe though is that I think selling into bigger organizations often requires a different skill set and is sometimes more challenging than selling to small companies. Can you talk a little bit about your sales process and how you navigate some of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's there's kind of two main ways I get business. So we will operate as an associate with bigger training companies. So sort of like a subcontractor, if you like. People will come along and say, hey, you can do this stuff. We've got this client. Will you come in and do whatever it is? Yes, it's usually the answer. Not always, actually, but normally because they know me, they know sort of how we do stuff and would tend to pick us because of that. Then there is more of the sort of the direct sale I have to do myself, which will tend to be through networking, really. That's always the best means of getting the introductions. And by that, I don't necessarily mean networking events. I mean, it's working with people and then asking them who they might know who would appreciate a similar kind of service, and can they sort of make the introductions or at least point me in the right direction. Keeping track of guys I work with, where they've gone, if they're moving around, another way to do that. And then 2020, this is very much about hopefully a whole new phase of marketing for me, where I'm trying to do something a little bit different to what I've previously done, and hopefully be able to tell you this time next year on how well that's worked or not.
So talk a little bit about what your goals are this year for your business and how you're pivoting.
Okay, so the offer stays the same. It's training, it's coaching, it's consultancy, but it's how I market it is going to become different. I'm currently writing a book, slightly behind schedule, but it's nearly done. The publishers
Aren't we all behind? Aren't we all wanting to write a book, and aren't we all behind schedule? So
yeah, so that's why I thought I'd share that. Yeah, everyone's nodding and saying yeah. No, but it's that will give me a platform to promote from. With it comes a level of authority, hopefully, or more authority if you like. But by having a slightly different spin in the way that sales can be done, gives me something a little bit different to talk about. It means that I can make probably more direct approaches by identifying, I have identified the type of company I want to work with and say, look, I've looked at you guys. I think I understand how you're selling. Here is a way that you should be considering. It's kind of like an expensive business card, I guess.
So tell us a little bit about this book. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, well, as you know, we talk a lot about partnering and partnering skills, and just as salespeople need IQ. Of course they do. They need to have a logic and a rationale in what they do. They also need to have good EQ or emotional intelligence to be able to sort of not only recognize their own feelings, their own thoughts, and adapt to them, but also others, so that they can do the sort of the interpersonal side of the business. But as we see a shift in sales, it is becoming far more collaborative. So whether you're in actually a partnership, a formal business alliance, or whether it's more of a traditional direct sale, the whole process and the things that salespeople do and the ones that are most successful is becoming more collaborative. People are working together more than probably ever. So there are a set of skills, PQ or partnering intelligence, that help people focus in on what can they do to apply that mindset to then make sure that the sales skills that they've got, they currently apply, can be done even better. And so it's bringing that element, the partnering skills element, together with the more traditional stuff which people are doing or not doing, as the case may be, which is also an interesting part of the project, and bring it together through a process which helps them meld the two together and be more effective as the world of sales is developing, as is the world in general.
So is that what they call solution selling, or is that similar to solution selling, or an outgrowth of it maybe?
Yeah, solution selling is an element of it. So there's so many words which people bandy around and people understand as different things. I tend to talk around classic selling. So classic selling is more of a simple process, which is making sure that you ask questions before you tell somebody anything. If you're not at least doing that, you're not selling, in my humble opinion. As you progress in complexity and value, then you would get into the more consultative or solution selling. I'm happy with those words to be interchanged, which is more about how you ask questions, how you work with a client to help them really understand what it is they're doing or not doing and the potential impacts of that. This can lead on even further in complexity and value to, again, I would term it value-based selling. So using more tools and sort of ways of thinking to really generate insight for a client and work with them to be able to deliver before we get right to the top end. Only in complexity and value, it's not necessarily that one's better than the other, but that's where you're into a more of an enterprise sale. What you're selling, is big ticket stuff and has a big impact on the organization. The partnering skills veneer, if you like, can be applied all across that continuum. It's a mindset, it's an ethos, and bringing that to the way in which you're operating will only make you a better salesperson.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you here just for a second. We need to take a break for station identification and a word from a few of our sponsors, but we'll be right back talking to Fred Copestake and his consulting and training company called Brindis. Hello there and welcome back. This is Doris Nagel and you are listening to the Savvy Entrepreneur Radio Show. We've been chatting with Fred Copestake, calling from England, who's joined me on the show this week to share the story of his consulting, training, and coaching company called Brindis. And just before the break, we were talking with Fred about the book he's been working on, which sounds extremely interesting and obviously a very fun and exciting time for his company. Fred, talk a little bit about the book production and how you see that as changing the direction of your company. You alluded to that earlier, and I think it'd be fun to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it changes the direction as such, in that I'm still all about sales performance and we'll deliver it through those different forms of training, coaching, consulting, like I've said. What I think it does do is move Brindis from just being a me too. I don't like to describe it like that anyway, but at the end of the day, it is a consultancy. It's made up, I've got some great guys that I can work with, some very talented consultants. I like to try and put myself in that bracket as well. But we're really kind of using a lot of the same tools, the same techniques, the same models, the things which are out there anyway. And there is some fantastic stuff, and they make up a large part of the book in that I say, look, this is the stuff that we should be doing. But it's how then to bring this other element of thinking about this, this partnering mentality, this partnering mindset that will give us something different to talk about. Let's face it, a lot of salespeople like new and shiny things. So when they see something a bit new, it will at least attract the attention. And so we can have product based around what does selling with partnering skills look like. So a flagship course, if you want to think in terms of, product offering. What it does though is that if people think, oh, that's great, I want to add that for my sales team. The perfect reader for me is a VP sales or a sales director. Great, I want to add that. Okay, well, let's have a think about what you're doing now. Oh, we're doing consultancy selling. Okay, consultative selling. Great. Actually, you're not properly. So if we're going to add the veneer, we have to make sure that we've got the foundation right. So hopefully it'll lead into more of the projects there where we're sort of getting a good solid foundation, and then we can bring this new piece in. So it gives us plenty of things to talk about, as you say, in a sort of exciting and a bit of a different way, as well as really looking at the solid stuff that's out there and continues to work.
There's no question that writing a book and producing a book, while I'm sure a pretty enormous undertaking, bigger probably than you expected, that'd be my guess based on talking to other people, but it still, I think, has a cachet to it. I think people are impressed when they see someone has written a book, and it's a lot of fun to talk about.
For sure. I mean, I know my mother will be proud for a start. So at least I've got one fan, guaranteed.
You've sold at least one copy, right?
Yeah, but she said she didn't want it signed because she figures that they might be more valuable in the future because all the rest of them are giveaways. Yeah, so I'm not sure. She's a fan, but she's not so confident. No. You're right. People do sort of sit up and take notice and sort of nod and look surprised and look impressed. And quite frankly, that is exactly the reaction that I'm looking for. If it does its job to spark the conversation, then even forgetting about the sort of the more modern approach to selling, it's done its job as it's getting me into that scenario where I know I can do a good job, and I go into sales mode. The fact that
it certainly makes conversations very easy to start because it's a unique thing and people usually want to hear about it. And I'm sure then it leads to lots of discussions that you might not otherwise have, right?
That is the plan. I do know people who've done similar things and they have been successful with it. So it's not just complete leap of faith. It is considered, it's deliberate, and it's still going to need an element of work. But that's what 2020 is looking like for me anyway.
All right. So what's the title of this book for our listeners so that they can look for it on Amazon or other bookseller sites?
Yeah, well, it's not quite there yet because the production process itself with the publisher is quite involved, and I never knew this, so I'm learning all the time. But the book is called Selling Through Partnering Skills.
Okay, so folks,
does what it says on the tin. I've thought of lots of funky titles and thought, I'll tell you what, should we just say what it is? The subtitle is A Modern Approach to Winning Business.
I'm sure at some point later this year, it'll be live and people should look for it. That's the title to look for by Fred Copestake.
Yeah, I can still talk about it even though it's not published. I've been very disciplined in not going off on one. I appreciate this show's only an hour long and not all day.
Well, but it's an exciting development and, one you should rightfully, I think, be very proud of. So I would, though, like to shift gears just a little bit and talk about the business of running a business. What for you has been the best part about having your own business?
Good question. I mean, one of the things that people who are looking to set up their own business think is that I'll have no boss. The reality, the reality is you get loads more bosses. Essentially, all your clients are now your bosses. They're not just a customer like they might be if you're an employee. They are your bosses because you've got to do this stuff to satisfy that when you're the business owner. So that probably sounds a bit kind of negative. The best, but that said, the answer is kind of the same as well, in that you are your own boss, so you can choose. It's not a question of turning up to work where you don't really believe in the vision and you don't kind of align with some of the things in the way the company operates. You've got control over that. If you are doing that and it's your own business, then you're an idiot, really. So you do have your own destiny in your hands. And on some days, that's absolutely fantastic. But, let's be fair. Some days it's quite daunting. Some days it's quite tiring. But on the whole, that would be, I'd say, the best thing. you are master of your own destiny.
So, what are some of the biggest roadblocks you've faced over the years as you've run and grown your business?
The biggest would have been because most of my business was into the Corona Academy, and looking back at that time, I didn't spend enough time bringing in other clients. I was having too much fun. I was flying around the world. I was selling beer. I was going to countries I'd not visited. The sales teams I was training were really good fun because the profile of the salespeople they look for. It was brilliant. That company started to go through some changes where they looked for bigger distributors, where they've got their own training centers, and so they leaned at the academy less. It wasn't as valuable for them. So that works. So we start to run less. And then we kind of hit recession time as well. So, it was a pretty horrible period, to be fair, where the main client stopped using you. The other one that I worked with was finding a lot less work, and pretty much everyone was clamping down on training anyway. So, even if I'd got a broader portfolio, life would have been difficult. It just happened to be very, very difficult, to be fair.
Wow. Well, I think that would have led a lot of people to say, I'm throwing in the towel. I'm going back and seeing if someone will hire me. How did you get through that? What kept you going?
Well, yeah, it's not completely a success story because it put me in panic mode. I'll be totally honest with that. And this is the stuff we have to face as as entrepreneurs, as people doing their own thing. And in panic mode, you don't think so clearly. I kind of
True.
just don't. You don't. It's kind of the brain gets all fuzzy, and I went off in the wrong direction. I thought it was a clever decision. Funny enough, it was actually to focus more in on SME. This is why I can be so clear about I know it's not my area. The logic behind it being there's a lot more SMEs. Okay, well, there's loads more people to train then.
But and it's a lot easier to get a meeting with the CEO of an SME too.
It is, and they can make a decision quicker. But again, they're all under pressure from recession as well. So training is absolutely off the agenda with them. Back in that time, I'd shifted away from the proposition, the sales proposition that I'm best at doing anyway, into sort of something that I wasn't even as expert in. I'd lost sight of where I'm really good and what I can really do, and so kind of went off down the wrong direction in panic mode, and had a pretty tough time of it, to be honest. It's and I don't mind talking about it because it's real. It's what happened.
Well, it happens. It happens to lots and lots of small business people. And I can tell you very candidly, I made the same mistake you did. I had, for a period of about 3 years, I had a phenomenal client and I was having so much fun. It was exactly the kind of work I wanted to do. And I was having so much fun working in the business, if you will, that I completely forgot to work on the business. And one day they came in and said, we're spending way too much on consultants. We're just going to cut you all off. That was it. That was, and all of a sudden it was gone. And I had not spent enough time, just like you, not spent enough time cultivating other relationships and using that time where I had a great client and a great source of steady income to really then use that time to build other aspects of my business. So I'm sure if you made that mistake and I made it, there's lots of people who made the same mistake.
Oh, for sure. And I really learned something interesting at this stage. I learned lots of stuff. Tough lesson, mind, but I learned lots of stuff. And it's actually, to be honest, it's to be open, it's to be authentic. Because in panic mode, I went to lots and lots of networking meetings and created myself fake work, as in, I'm doing stuff, I've got my suit on, I'm talking to people about things and what have you. And of course, when you're meeting people, how are things? Yeah, it's great, it's brilliant, it's fantastic. Everyone was great and brilliant and fantastic, but I don't think they were. I really don't think they were. And one day I actually said something, it really is hard. And he went, I'm glad you said that. I'm finding it absolute nightmare. And we start to have this really honest discussion. And when I started to do that, there were some other people that we got on well with, and we started talking to them. And actually, there's a lot of us in the same boat. And when we start becoming more honest about it and talking about it, that's when we could do something more constructive, rather than kind of living this false, everything is brilliant kind of, I don't know what, a mask, if you like. It's no, stuff's tough. What can we do about it? How can we do some real practical things to turn ourselves around and to sort of do stuff differently? And so, yeah, that's kind of that was a a big sort of light bulb moment in that you can waste a lot of time being false, but actually just be honest with stuff, and you'll get to where you want to be probably faster. And so that's kind of a piece. It's easier said than done, I admit, but it's something I've learned and now try to work along those lines far more.
Well, I think starting a business and running your own business is a very brave thing to do. And I think this is maybe just another aspect of being brave, is being open and honest with people.
Absolutely. Yeah, and people are there to help. Most people want to see people do well. Some people are a bit weird and just dislike people being more successful, but on the whole, people are there to help, and more often than not, you do have the answers. But when you've got that sort of muddied thinking, as I had at that stage, or even if you haven't, it's useful to have people to help you work through what is the thing that you need to do to get on top of it, which is why I'm such a big fan of coaching. I've been on the receiving end of some excellent coaching from people, both formal and people who probably didn't realize they were doing it. It starts to clarify things, and we're back on the sort of the wave, if you like. So
Where would you like your business to be in 5 years?
Turning over more, more clients, more different clients, more direct clients. I wouldn't say do nothing as associate, because I do actually enjoy working with if it's the right kind of training company and the right kind of people, I do enjoy that, because that's where I learn a lot as a trainer if I'm working with other trainers. I'd like to get more tech involved in what I can offer. This will be playing catch up. There's some great stuff out there, platforms, and even sort of linking it into apps on mobile phones, where training can really be embedded very powerfully. People are going to mess around on these things anyway. Let's face it. So let's go with that. And so I'd like to have my own version, own platform, own thing that I can add into my own solutions, my own propositions.
Are you talking about things like virtual reality or simulations, that sort of thing?
No, not even as advanced as that. Just something where people can, we can communicate with people pre-training. There might be elements of e-learning in there. People can put in sort of action plans and sort of have ways in which they're progressing through the things that they've said are going to make a difference for themselves, that have come out of the classroom stuff. I want to continue doing classroom stuff. I enjoy it, and I think that for my market, with salespeople, they will want to. They need to do the face-to-face stuff. It is kind of how they're wired. You can have communities built in there. There's some clever stuff that can just give the elegant solution I talked about earlier. Give it even more oomph, if you like, and the client can get bigger bang for their bucks. That would be my ideal scenario, to sort of have that in the offer as well.
We're almost out of time, Fred. The hour just flew by.
Wow, hasn't it?
Any final words of advice for people, particularly in professional services, as they start or try to grow their business?
Cash flow. Keep an eye on that. Again, a lesson hard learned, which I'll be honest about. That's the point of coming on this, to help folk. And if I've had to suffer hardships, then hopefully people won't. It might put stuff aside. You're going to get a tax bill. What are the three certainties in life? Life, death. Life, death, taxes. Make sure you've got the money to pay that, because defaulting or just getting behind or giving yourself a problem with that will just knock any kind of plan and all the good stuff and innovation and things that you want to apply. You're on the back foot straight away. So that is one thing I think is quite important. Make sure you are doing what you enjoy, and have fun with it. I'd say that to anybody at work, to be fair, because you spend more time at work than you do sort of with your family or at home. But when it's your own thing, and times might get a bit tough and might feel overwhelmed, if it's also something you're not enjoying and it's not fun, that's going to be difficult to ride those blips. So it's got to be something that people say they're passionate about or fun, or rather than just I'm doing that because it looks so it's really profitable.
Or because somebody tells you that's a good way to make a living or a good business to have.
It'll become pretty tiring pretty quick, I'd have thought. Yeah. But I love what I do, so it's well,
it's great. I think that shines through. Fred, before we wrap up, how should people reach you if they're interested in learning more about Brindis or you?
That's really kind offer. So yeah, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Fred Copestake, Copestake. And by the way, it's not chopstick, cupcake, soap plate, cheapskate, or anything like that. So there aren't many Fred Copestake, so you'll find me on that. Company website is www.brindis.co.uk. Connect with me on those, and if it's more about the book and how that looks, I have got a website for that as well, and I can direct people towards it to have a look or talk their ears off about it, whatever their preference.
Fantastic. That's our show for this week. Fred, thanks so much for being with us today and joining us all the way from jolly old England.
Oh, thank you. Really enjoyed it.
As did I. And thanks to all of our listeners for listening. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I did. To listen to an on-demand recording podcast of today's show, along with other free information and resources for entrepreneurs, you can go to the Savvy Entrepreneur show page at lakesradio.org, to my consulting website, which is globalocityservices.com, or my law website, which is forsythialaw.com. Be sure to join us next Saturday when our guest will be Ty Rohrer. He manages 2 nonprofits. That's an interesting form of entrepreneurship, nonprofits, that I'm not sure everybody thinks about as entrepreneurship, but I certainly think it takes a lot of entrepreneurial skills to be successful at it. He has loads of experience with different nonprofits and lots of words of wisdom for people who are thinking about either donating their time or using that as a way to make some money for your family. So it'll be a great listen. Be sure not to miss it. And until then, I'm Doris Nagel, wishing you happy entrepreneuring.